So the best receiver at Chiefs training camp so far may not be who you think it is because he's not making a ton of highlight-worthy plays per se. However, he's been feasting over the middle of the field, and multiple beat reporters have recently commented about how good he's looked. So I've got to talk about that, the surprising depth chart the Chiefs released last night, an injury scare at practice, and more. But first, how about those? All right, today was the last padded practice until the first preseason game this Saturday, and there's definitely plenty to talk about. For starters, I want to correct something I said yesterday when I said after 2 days at camp, former Raiders head coach John Gruden was no longer there. Well, apparently he was there yesterday and was spotted out there once again today. So that makes 4 days in a row of John Gruden in Chiefs apparel with coaches at training camp. At this point, I am wondering if maybe there's something to this. Could Gruden, for example, have been brought in as a consultant or maybe an assistant? It obviously could be nothing at all, but 4 days in a row just visiting for fun and hanging out in the humid Midwest heat, I'm not so sure. Let me know your thoughts on this, though. Do you think Gruden could be here in some sort of a working capacity with the Chiefs or nah? And if he is, how do you feel about that, given the reason why Gruden resigned as the Raiders head coach after some of those emails surfaced back in 2021? Let me know either way in the comments down below. Andy Reid, he did not make it seem like he was there, talking about Gruden, in any advisor type of role, or at least in any long-term capacity when asked about it today at his presser with the media. He said that Gruden advises a lot of people and is staying busy. He's going to keep doing that, and hopefully he's able to get back in the league and once again become a head coach. Gruden has also been sitting in on the meetings with the team, offense, defense, and special teams, with Andy adding he's a heck of a coach. Patrick Mahomes was also asked about Gruden being there, and Pat said it's been good to hear from an offensive mind that has prepared to go against them in the past when he was a Raider, and it's been fun to have him out there and just talk football. Next up, today's practice saw the return of Clyde Edwards-Helaire after he missed yesterday due to illness. Then, wide receiver Kadarius Toney missed a few days due to an ankle injury, but was back the last couple of days, leaving both Monday and Tuesday's practices a bit early in front of the cart. Well, today, he came out with no helmet, so Toney did not work today, and it appears that the reason why he left practice early yesterday was because his back tightened up on him. So Toney is working through a bit of an ankle tweak as well as some back tightness. And that's not the best news to hear for a guy with a lengthy injury history and a guy that really needs a very good camp/preseason to lock in a roster spot, at least in my opinion. Can he still make it? I mean, sure, the Chiefs would love to not eat $2.5 million in dead money by moving on from him, but the best ability for any player is availability. So keeping a guy like Toney around, yet having an increased chance he doesn't consistently see the field just to save some money at the expense of a receiver who could be healthier and more readily available, that seems a bit risky to me. I'm talking about players like Mecole Hardman, Justin Ross, or Nico Remigio, even potentially Sky Moore. I think the Chiefs are going to do all they can to keep Sky on the roster, but these are all guys fighting to make the roster and could be potential cut candidates at the conclusion of preseason. Anyway, ultimately, time's going to tell there with Toney about his back tweak and how long he's out, but every day he misses, it is not boding well for him, we'll just say that, as we take a look at this unofficial depth chart at the end of this video. Anyway, the next player who didn't practice today was defensive tackle Chris Jones. Day number 2 in a row for him as he tweaked his shoulder on Monday, leaving practice a bit early. Andy Reid said it was a shoulder stinger, and hopefully whatever is going on with that shoulder is minor because the D-line really needs Chris Jones out there to thrive. However, this shouldn't yet be a real cause for concern considering there's still roughly a month until the first regular season game against the Ravens. So, CEH returned, Toney was out, as was Chris Jones. Then the rest who missed today's practice have been missing them for a little while here, with those being Nick Bolton, elbow, Justin Reed, quad, cornerback Kelvin Joseph, hamstring, wide receiver Jaron Hayek, shoulder, and then BJ Thompson is still absent due to what's being labeled as an illness after that health scare he had back in June. Harrison Butker was in the meeting room when that happened, being the guy to run and get help from the trainers or get their attention to come and assist BJ as BJ went into cardiac arrest. And Harrison Butker talked about the situation a little bit when he spoke to the media today, saying he's grateful BJ was able to make it through that experience.
I missed him at the ring ceremony, but he was out here at a training camp practice, and obviously he's just thankful to be alive. He is so excited to be around the team. He can't wait to be back. I know he's maybe got a couple more weeks, but he's excited to just be in the locker room again and feel the support from all of his teammates.
And while you can't take a teammate's word as canon about a player's potential return, Butker did make it seem like he could potentially be back in a couple weeks or so. So it seems like BJ Thompson's progress is going very well so far. And speaking of scares, this was not as serious as BJ Thompson's health scare, to be clear, but there was a health scare that happened today involving a second-year offensive tackle in Wanya Morris. He's a guy that's battling it out for the starting left tackle spot, though at least for now it appears that spot is purely Kingsley Suamata'ia's spot to lose. Anyway, the injury scare happened today during a play when Wanya Morris was shaken up badly enough that every Chiefs player took a knee, appearing to have injured his right knee. It was being looked at by the trainers. Then he was able to eventually walk off the field on his own power. Trainers looked at him more afterwards, looking at that right knee in particular. However, it looks like crisis or serious crisis was averted because he was able to walk it off a bit on the sideline, staying out there, holding onto his helmet. He was then held out of 1v1 reps, but could be spotted here participating in some individual work, with PJ Green saying he appeared to be working through some discomfort. Shortly after that, Morris could be seen taking reps during the long drive period, working in with the second team offense. So it looks like whatever is going on with Wanya's knee is nothing too serious if he was able to eventually walk off on his own power and then work back in during 11s. After practice, Andy Reid did say Wanya tweaked his knee. So my question is, will he be able to play this Saturday? He's got a couple days of rest, so we shall see there with Wanya, but those reps are probably going to be needed. However, the Chiefs are often going to err on the side of caution and not further try to re-aggravate somebody's injury. Andy Reid also said during the presser that everybody who's basically not been working during practice, especially those who didn't work today, they're probably not going to work into Saturday's matchup against the Jags. Then another player worth mentioning is a guy who had to leave practice early in the cart, and that was linebacker Swayze Bozeman. Trainers were looking at his left knee, and Andy reported that Swayze hyperextended it. The severity of his knee hyperextension is unknown at this point in time, but he's getting it looked at, and hopefully it's nothing too serious. Then, while Joe Toney could be seen getting some work in at practice as he's being ramped up from that chest injury recently coming off the PUP list, Andy Reid did say today that Toney will not play in this Saturday's matchup against the Jags. Big Red then said each group of players will play one quarter on Saturday. So the first team offense and first team defense will play the first quarter, then the second team O and D will come out and play during the second quarter, then the third and fourth team will play in the second half. I would imagine that first team O-line looks like Kingsley at left tackle, and with Joe Toney out, Mike Caliendo at left guard, then Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, and Jawan Taylor. With that being said, even though Andy said the ones will play the first quarter, he typically pulls several of the starters after one or maybe two drives during this first game. So sure, we will see Mahomes out there, Travis Kelce, among others, but they could very well be done after one drive depending on how it goes. Andy then complimented the team's running back, fullback hybrid, Carson Steele, who's listed on the unofficial depth chart that was released last night as a fullback. Again, I'll talk about that at the end of this video, but Andy said Steele is a tweener guy, a heck of a running back. What he did at Ball State and UCLA as a running back was unbelievable, but right now they are moving him around to see if he can do the fullback stuff. So far, he's done what was asked, but they will just see how he does in these preseason games, and then how the numbers pan out as far as roster cuts go to get the 90 down to 53. So far, it looks like Steele stock is rising. Pete Sweeney of Arrowhead Pride said yesterday he's trending to make the 53. He's been impressing the coaches and will probably have a legitimate shot at making the 53-man roster for reasons I mentioned in yesterday's video here, if he has a great preseason. Andy also mentioned another running back in Isaiah Pacheco, complimenting his ability as a pass-catching back. He worked with the wide receiver coach this past offseason, and he's been working in on some short routes, longer routes, and even some option routes. Mahomes specifically mentioned that during his presser today, saying they've even lined him up in the slot. And if Pacheco can be effective out of there from time to time, that's only going to make him that much more of a better player. Pacheco wants to come in. You know how it is with his type of violent running style, and with him being more of a well-rounded back, catching passes out of the backfield and being better in pass protection, I'm very excited for Pacheco this season. Anyway, back to Andy Reid, because he then congratulated Harrison Butker on becoming the highest paid kicker in the NFL, saying he's been consistent, coming up clutch for them in many big situations, really coming through for the team. That much is evident. He was last year's season-long MVP, is the second most accurate kicker in NFL history, and I could kind of go on and on about how well Harrison Butker has performed out on the field. But Andy Reid said he's happy for Butker to get paid, and he's happy for the team to have him around for years to come. A win-win situation is what Big Red made things seem like. He also mentioned that Harrison is a guy who simply puts his head down and works. He's not a guy who comes in and becomes a distraction, and he doesn't think the money is going to change that about him. Speaking of Butker, he spoke to the media today as well. I mentioned this earlier in the video, but it was his first time since he gave that off-season graduation speech. That made some people rather upset. More on that in a second here, but Butker first off said he feels great going into year 8, and it's surreal to think about the success he's been able to have by the age of 29. He's grateful for it all, and it's kind of crazy to think about how he's now the highest paid kicker in the NFL. It probably won't hold for very long, but he is extremely humbled by that. And if you didn't know, Butker negotiated this deal without an agent, to which he said was a lot of fun going back and forth, going over spreadsheets and all that good stuff with the team's front office. Not a lot of players do it, but it was a challenge he wanted to take on, and it helped that he had a great relationship with the front office, and it all worked out at the end of the day. He's blessed to have the teammates he's had around him over the years, as well as a great special teams coach in Dave Toub. Then, when asked about his speech from months back at that Catholic graduation ceremony, Butker said he prepped months for that speech, and he stands by what he said 100%. He was also encouraged to hear his teammates say that even if they didn't agree with what he said, they still respect him as a reputable friend and teammate.
You know, I felt very encouraged to hear that, for them to be able to publicly say, Harrison made all these statements that maybe people don't agree with, but I've seen Harrison for 7 years come into work and be someone that is of good character. I think that meant a lot to me for him to say that, and I want people to know that no matter what I say, it might be the complete opposite of you, I'm still going to love you, no matter what your opinions are, no matter how different we may be. I'm going to love you, and we're going to get along and, probably be good friends.
And honestly, Butker goes into much more detail about the speech. He was asked several more questions about this, and he gave answers about his wife, his thoughts on women, along with his heart behind the speech in today's presser. So if you want to listen to the full thing, it's well worth the listen, and make sure you check out the link in the comments down below or on the Chiefs YouTube channel. Regardless if you agreed with Harrison Butker or not, I think it's well worth the listen. Next up, today's practice did have some interesting highlights, though not much was caught on camera with it being exclusive to season ticket members. However, Hollywood Brown could be seen catching a touchdown in red zone on this play here when Mahomes fired one in left side for the wide open score. More of that's going to happen in the regular season. Book it. Then, Deneric Prince was working back in with the first team offense as he makes a legitimate push for the 53-man roster. Another guy that was mentioned alongside Carson Steele as a running back whose stock is way up. Pacheco, speaking of running backs, picked up a nice blitz from Tranquil here on this play as Mahomes connected to a very open Jared Wiley on this shallow crosser. Charles Goldman said that Rashee Rice needs to be put into the Chiefs 7-on-7 Hall of Fame because he's a cheat code out there. And Nick Roche, also, like Charles Goldman of A to Z Sports, said that Rice has been the most impressive receiver to him during camp out of all of them. So yeah, if the suspension isn't until next year, I agree that Rice is going to have a massive year 2 in this offense. Another receiver on pace to have at least an impactful year as a rookie, though his stat line is still very much to be determined, is Xavier Worthy. Mahomes spoke with the media today saying Worthy is fast, of course, but runs with pace fast as far as timing goes on his routes. He's a great route runner who's able to track the ball very well and is doing a good job of fighting off press as best he can, and has only gotten better during camp thus far, and the continued reps are only going to be good for him. Other receivers who had some nice plays today were wide receiver Mecole Hardman, who made a nice contested grab with Najee Johnson tight on him in coverage during 11s for the touchdown. Then Carson Wentz hit Justin Ross for a 30-yard back shoulder touchdown, and Ross was amped up after this touchdown and let the DB in coverage know what's good. That DB was Joshua Williams, who took some exception to that. Competitive juices then started flowing, and next thing you know, they had to be separated, and you really love to see these guys going at it at camp. You know, nothing too serious happened after the play, but they're both fired up and really giving it their all. And I just wish that Ross touchdown was on camera. Now, something that was thankfully on camera was this behind-the-back pass from Patrick Mahomes to Isaiah Pacheco in red zone period. Mahomes is in the gun. Pacheco a bit up and to his right with Kelce in motion. Mahomes then takes the snap, began rolling out, and at the perfect moment, with pressure bearing down on him, he flipped it behind the back to an awaiting Pacheco, who snagged the easy grab for the touchdown. And if that doesn't get you all amped up on Mountain Dew, I don't really know what will. That's a perfect example on how a behind-the-back pass could legitimately be used in a real game setting. And while I'm not sure if it will for sure happen or not this season, I sure hope it does in a game against the Raiders and the 7th-round rookie who mocked Mahomes with the Kermit the Frog puppet thing, if this 7th-round rookie even makes Vegas's roster, is the guy nearest in coverage when this play happens. Anyway, sorry, not sorry, but Mahomes said he's excited for the opportunity to get some reps in during the preseason. He loves football, and being able to go out there and get a little work in with the starting offense is something he looks forward to. The ultimate goal of this is obviously to get some momentum with the guys and then come out of this healthy. And aside from health, one thing I want to watch out for is the battle for that cornerback 2 spot. So, who lines up opposite Trent McDuffie this Saturday when the first team is out there? Well, today it was Jalen Watson, so maybe that's who it'll be on Saturday, but the unofficial depth chart that the Chiefs released, at least right now, tells a little bit of a different story. There's a lot to look at here, but at the end of the day, this doesn't mean all that much. Again, it's unofficial, and I don't believe this has a ton of input from the Chiefs coaching staff, more PR. It's more PR related. But here we go. They currently have the receivers listed in this order: Hollywood Brown, Rashee Rice, Justin Watson, Xavier Worthy, Sky Moore, Justin Ross, Mecole Hardman, Nico Remigio, Kadarius Toney, and Cornell Powell. So yeah, you can read into that a couple different ways or not at all, considering again, it's the unofficial depth chart, but Toney could potentially not be in a great spot. He's like all the way down at wide receiver 7 or whatever this is. Or you could read it as this: he's got a couple injuries, won't really be playing in Saturday's game anyway, so they lowered him and are going to give some of these other guys more looks. Kingsley, then if you go to the offensive line, he's the starting left tackle. No other real surprises there. Mike Caliendo is going to work in rather than Joe Thuney. Then if you look at the running backs, the order right now is Pacheco, CEH, Deneric Prince, Keontae Ingram, LRZ, and finally, Amani Bailey. So to see Bailey as number 6 with LRZ as 5, I thought was a little bit interesting. Meanwhile, Carson Steele is indeed listed as a fullback on there, which is pretty fun. Then for special teams, the punt returner depth is Xavier Worthy, Mecole Hardman, and Nico Remigio. And I won't lie, I do not love the idea of Xavier Worthy returning punts and would prefer Mecole to do this if at all possible. Worthy is going to, in theory, have a pretty big role on offense, so in a perfect world, they keep him healthy for the offense first and foremost. Then for the kick returners, it's Nico Remigio, Mecole Hardman, and finally, Louis Rees-Zammit. That's a positive nod for Remigio, and maybe, just maybe, he finds his way on the roster as that wide receiver 6 to be both the team's kick and punt returner. Next up, if we skim over to the defense, the cornerback order is interesting here. They have the corners listed as McDuffie, Joshua Williams, then Jalen Watson, followed by Najee Johnson as the top 4 corners. And then for some reason, Chamari Connor is listed as CB6, which is a little confusing to me considering he's a safety. But hey, they've been using him in the slot at times, so maybe that's why he's on there. Not really sure. Again, it's the unofficial depth chart, so it is what it is. Then there's no real surprises here in the linebacker room, with them being listed as Drew Tranquil, Nick Bolton, Leo Chanel, Curtis Jacobs, Jack Cochran, Cam Jones, and Swayze Bozeman. That's a positive sign for the UDFA Curtis Jacobs at the moment. And I'm actually going to skip the safety room because outside of Chamari not being listed as a safety, it all makes pretty good sense to me. You can see them on the screen here, though, if you want to see who they are. The starting D-line, though, is Mike Dana, Turk Wharton, Chris Jones, and Carl Loftus, followed by, you would maybe have them be the second team defense right now, FAU. Then on the inside, Mike Pinnell, Neil Farrell, and Malik Herring on the other side. So yeah, the depth chart should give us some sense of which quarter these players could possibly be playing, or at least a mostly accurate order of how these guys should be appearing throughout the game. But let me know your thoughts on this. Are there any real surprises on here for you? And what do you think about it overall as the Chiefs head into their first preseason matchup? And until next time, let's go. Let's freaking go. How about those?